Hello and welcome to Sound Like, where today we're going to be having a look at Kill or Be Killed. At the time of recording, it is the latest song to be released by Muse. As always with this series, I'm going to be taking the song section by section, analysing each bit, comparing it to my recent cover, showing you the pedals that I use, how I dial in those tones so that you can figure out how to sound like Kill or Be Killed. The guitar I'm going to be using for this video is going to be my Harley Benton TE20HH, due to the weird tuning for this song, which is B, F sharp, B, F sharp, B, E. But before we get into it, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, hit the bell to not miss out on any of my content, and without any further ado, let's get started. So to kick things off, we're going to be having a look at the intro riff of the song. This section is going to cover pretty much every time that appears, apart from the last one, which we'll get to when we get to it. In terms of the effects that I'm using, it starts with the whammy, splitting off into the overdrive distortion and the big muff. And the reason why I'm going for these pedals is because the big muff offers that nice low grittiness for the kind of lower octave parts, but when the whammy comes in, it kind of fails a bit, so that is then sort of compensated by the overdrive distortion, which is kind of balance between distortion and overdrive in the kind of the settings of this pedal. To my mind, that kind of gives us a great range of sounds that I've then used in my recent cover. If you have a mono board at home, I would suggest that you want something that is going to cut through the mix fairly well, so you don't want to rely on the big muff for this. You might want to go for a distortion or an overdriven type sound, because the sound itself on the album is quite kind of without kind of low end to it. It's got a bit of grit, but you want to focus on the kind of more the crisp high ends for that to really punch through. So if you're limited, go for an overdrive distortion type sound. Because of the board that I have, I can kind of double up some sounds. And with all that in mind, this is what that sounds like. Moving on to the verse for Kill or Be Killed now, the mood drastically changes up in terms of what's going on with the guitar. Previously it was, a big muff, a whammy and an overdrive distortion, adding loads of kind of frequency content in there, a lot of drive. Because we love dynamic range, and clearly Muse still like a bit of dynamic range, the whole production kind of, for me at least, kind of really pulls back. We're taking all those effects out and replacing it with my MXR Timmy overdrive. I've no idea what Matt is using in the studio, but that's what I'm using. To really heavily contrast that big kind of riff sound that we saw previously, to bring it right down to something that is quite often that we see in songs, something that is just supporting the rhythm. To achieve this sound is really quite simple. You just want to go for an overdrive type sound, nothing that's going to push itself out too far. Quite a fair amount of gain to kind of really have that kind of crispness and drama to it, but then nothing really much beyond that. In terms of the controls that I've got on the pedal that I'm using, the gain is turned up quite a lot to get that real kind of drive in there, but not being too flashy because it's just an overdrive. The bass is turned up to about 1 o'clock and the treble at around 3. To me is just enough to kind of keep it kind of pushing through. You can hear it, but it's not trying to distract too much, and I think that idea for that sound sits quite well. Comparing it to the riff that we've just played, and if you have a mono board and you're using just the kind of distortion or overdrive sound that we used previously, you want to have a sound that's even less dramatic, let's say, than that, to kind of really keep in mind that heavy contrast. If you're going to use the same sound for the intro riff and the verse, that's not really going to work out so well. So if you're stuck to a few pedals, you might want to kind of consider how you want to push that, or the old favourite technique of just rolling the gain off the guitar could work quite well. And with that in mind, this is what that sounds like. So after the verse, we're moving on to the pre-chorus, and the sounds that I've got here is still using the MXR Timmy overdrive, but I'm splitting the channel. So one side is the overdrive, and then we're bringing back in the overdrive distortion. Now I've decided to do this instead of keeping the same verse sound because it needs that little bit of extra drive. Because we're palm muting, we're leaning on one string for this point. I want a bit of extra kind of grit that really the Timmy overdrive can't really do, especially at the settings that I have it for. Bringing in the overdrive distortion, which isn't kind of pushing itself out too much, helps to kind of compensate for the lack of drive from the Timmy overdrive, and a stereo spread is always really nice. If you have a mono board and you kind of agree that you want to have that extra drive in there to come away from the verse, I would suggest that you could then use the distortion or the drive setting that you were using for the intro riff part of the song. Both will do the same sorts of things, they're not being too dramatic out there. So with that in mind, this is what my rig sounds like. Coming out of the pre-chorus into the chorus, the sound changes up dramatically. What I've been using previously up to this point is overdrive type sounds with a bit of grit from like a Big Muff. Nothing too crazy and out there, it's kind of a bit chunky and a bit gritty, but it's still quite boxy and kind of mid-tony. So my thoughts for the chorus is gonna try and be something to get away from what we've been looking at previously. A few sounds have been incorporating using two pedals in a stereo spread sound. For this, because the sound is so brutal and such a kind of like wall of sound sort of approach, I wanted to get away from what I've been doing previously. So instead we're just using one pedal. That one pedal is the MXR Prime Distortion. When I was first kind of building my patch for Kill or Be Killed for the chorus, I did originally overcomplicate, if you will, the sound for this by using two pedals in a stereo spread, and it just didn't hit quite as much as I wanted it to. I then experimented with just using the Prime Distortion, and it pretty much does everything I need it to. Getting that balance between the high end and the low end with the tone control is quite key, but finding something that will work for you with a great amount of crispness but a good kind of solid low end chunk to it is going to be really critical to get that extra drive through, because the guitar playing for this is split between getting that full open chord strum going, but then also the palm muting section, and the reliance on a good amount of low end is critical for that palm muting bit. So you really want to go for a big sound, as kind of pretty much as big as you can really get it. It might be a bit overboard and a bit too much, but you really want to get into the headspace of distancing yourself from the sounds that we've been using previously, because this sound has got a lot of content to it, kind of frequency wise, so it's a good excuse to just use all the pedals that you've got if you've got a lot. So with that in mind, this is what it sounds like. Moving on to what I'm only really able to describe and articulate as the next bit of the song, which comes after the second chorus of the song. All I'm really doing is taking the chorus sound that I've got and adding in my delay pedal. I found that using the same drive as before is still really effective. It kind of keeps all that crispness, keeps that energy going, and just using the delay pedal to open up those ambiances, but layered up with the vocal track, helps immensely. What I'm also using is a foot switch on my Boss ES8 to kind of bring in that delay pedal in and out straight away. Now I want to do this because there's the section where the kind of palm muted riff comes back in. Doing that with delay on is just going to be completely lost in the mix, so I need a way to just kind of take out that delay straight away. If I want to play that particular riff, or if I just want to lean on the ambient side of things, the ES8 allows me to kind of take this section really as I want for this. It's entirely up to you if you want to incorporate that ambient sort of side of things, and if you want to just play that riff or not play that riff. It's just a little bit extra, it's kind of a bonus if you will. Don't kind of think that this is absolutely critical to playing the song. So really it's up to you, especially for this whole section. This is the most dealer's choice, I would say, aspect of the song. So with all that in mind, this is what it sounds like for me. Coming straight out of the next bit is the breakdown. Now I'm using the exact same patch as I am for the chorus for this. Definitely keep in mind to take out the delay pedal if you're using the delay pedal for those kind of ambiances from the next bit. Absolutely critical. The sound that I'm getting for the chorus, which is leaning much towards getting a good crisp sound from it, but kind of getting a good amount of low end because of the palm muting bit, that mentality is exactly the same for this kind of breakdown section. It's really critical to kind of keep that going on in there. Not much really else to say with that, so with that in mind, this is what it sounds like. So now we're going to move on to the solo section for Kill or Be Killed. Now what's going on here effects wise is exactly the same as what's going on in the intro riff. When I was building this patch I had the same sorts of kind of questions in my head. How do I get something that's going to have the kind of the low end grit but also the kind of clarity that I need for both of these aspects, and duplicating the patch is what kind of came through. I still have the same needs and requirements, and so that's why it fits in there. The same for the intro riff. I need a good low end grittiness for the non-whammy bit, and then something that's going to kind of clear up better than what the big muff would with the whammy section, and so the overdrive distortion came in there. The prime distortion wasn't used because it goes a bit too hard, so the next best option was the overdrive distortion. Entirely up to you how you want to kind of tackle that. If you're limited with pedals, you, both in terms of if it's a mono board and the amount that you have, you could easily quite get away with using your chorus sound and a whammy pedal if you have a whammy for this sound, or you could go to your intro riff sound. Again, entirely up to you, but you know, the more options you have on a pedal board, the better. You can layer them up quite differently. You don't have to do what I'm doing, but I'm just showing you what I've got. So the solo section is kind of split into two, and I'm using the same patch for both parts, if you will, relying on the big muff for the kind of hammer-on pull-off section and more of the overdrive distortion pedal for the whammy section. So with that in mind, this is what it all sounds like. So moving on out of the solo straight into the last chorus, which is exactly the same as the chorus sounds that we've used before, but we're just going to put a whammy in front of the pedal or the drive that you're going to be using. Exactly the same mentality there, the idea is the same. You just want the whammy in there because of the harmonics that are going on. All it is just a natural harmonic over the 5th fret on a couple of the strings, and then just letting the whammy go up 1 octave just to kind of have that weird sound. It's very reminiscent of Unsustainable, so that's where that kind of familiarity is going to be coming from. Outside of that, it's exactly the same. There's no kind of special extra nuance, well, not to my ear at least. Using the same pedal kind of works. You don't want to kind of try and reinvent the wheel, as it were, with this. You don't want to go too mad with it. So here it is. Section for the song is the final version of the riff. Exactly the same as we've seen before. Whammy, overdrive distortion, big muff. All I'm adding in here is my phase 90 to my overdrive distortion channel. This is done because in the studio version of the song there is some modulation going on in there. Personally, I hate the sound of that. Well, hate is a strong word. Personally, I don't like the plugin because it sounds like a plugin. The phaser effect that they're using here, it sounds way too like the kind of free phase plugin that you can get in Logic. A proper phase 90 sounds so much better on the slowest speed it has, which is what I'm using. This patch with the phaser stays on for the rest of the song. That slow modulation really kind of helps bring in a new texture and a new dynamic to the song. Even in the kind of the very tail end of the song, it's still a great opportunity to get a bit creative as much as you can. The whole song itself is very sonically interesting, so much better than the song, The Will of the People. So there's always a great excuse to kind of get as dynamic and as interesting as you can within there. The mentality in terms of the sounds that you want to achieve is exactly the same as we've seen before, so that's why I'm using the same patch, just bringing in that modulation for a little bit of an extra texture. If you don't have a modulation pedal, don't worry about it. It's just a little extra kind of layer that is kind of superfluous, but if you've got it, absolutely go for it. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. And with all that in mind, this is what it sounds like. So there we go, that is it. That is all of the patches that I use for Kill or Be Killed. You can hear all of them in action in here in my recent cover of the song. So much fun to play. It's probably one of the most energetic songs from the album. It's probably one of my favourite kind of big riff, big energy, big high octane songs that Muse have done, especially in recent years. It really has a lot to offer. A lot of the composition aspects and the mixing from the song itself is stuff that we've not really seen from Muse, particularly especially this hard. All the patches that I've shown you and all the effects that I'm using in this song are, as always, just a suggestion. I think they work, but you tell me what you think about it down in the comments below. What pedals are you using when you're trying to achieve this song? Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, hit the notification bell to not miss out on any of my content, and I've been Harry, and thanks for watching.